Café Cléopâtre, located at 1230 Rue Saint-Laurent, has lived through some of the most complicated chapters of Montreal's old red light district. Built in the 1890s, this building became part of a scene that's often judged, misunderstood, and pushed away from the city's respected history. Over time, it becomes a space for nightlife, adult performance, burlesque, drag, and communities that did not always have a safe place to stay to exist openly. But the history of Café Cléopâtre is not only about performances. The building has been connected to violence, city crackdowns, organized crime suspicions, redevelopment battles, and a mysterious bathroom that kept on making news reports. With all of this troubled history, narrows it down to one question: what do these walls still carry? It may be the energy left behind by decades of pressure, survival, anger, resistance in a building the city kept trying to erase as Montreal shifted towards something newer, shinier, and easier to sell. So let's turn down the house lights, illuminate the stage, and step into the venue's history. This is Backstage After Dark. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Backstage After Dark. I'm Sarah Beaupre. I want to thank you for your feedback, both good and bad, about the first episode of the series. I've learned quite a bit and will only get better as the series goes. With that said, let's talk about the history of our next venue, Café Cléopâtre. The building was constructed around 1895, during a period when Saint-Laurent was growing as a commercial street shaped by working-class residents, immigrant communities, nightlife, and businesses that changed with the needs of the neighborhood. The original purpose of the building remains unclear to me. I could not find confirmed information explaining exactly what it was built for. But by the early 1900s, the address began appearing in records connected to different kinds of commercial activity. In 1918, job postings connected to the address were looking for seamstresses, specifically for women's lingerie. A few months later, the same address was connected to wood distribution for fuel. This gives me the impression that the building may have been used by several businesses, or possibly divided into different rooms or spaces for different kinds of work. There is nothing that clearly suggests the building was already a cabaret. By the 1950s, the building appears to have gone through another shift. In 1956, job postings appeared for bilingual saleswomen under the name F.W. Woolworth, the department store that had its main doors near the corner of Saint Laurent and St. Catherine. It is unclear if 1230 Saint Laurent was being used directly by Woolworth, but it may have been office space, storage, sewing space, or some kind of support space connected to the department store. Around this same period, the building's identity began shifting into nightlife. By the early 1950s, the address begins appearing as Cafe Canasta, a cabaret-style cafe with live entertainment. The venue featured singers, performers, organ music, themed nights, and the atmosphere of a nightlife venue operating in the middle of Montreal's red light district. Although prohibition had already ended by this time, Montreal still had a reputation as a city where people came to drink, party, gamble, watch shows, and take part in forms of nightlife that were not always accepted elsewhere. But that same year, the darker side of the venue's history began appearing in the newspapers. In 1951, a man named Jean-Paul Servat was detained by police after officers followed him into the bathroom and discovered him stashing a bayonet under the toilet bowl. As police investigated further, 4 other men he was with were detained after knives were found under the table where the group has been sitting. Nothing major appears to have happened that night, but the incident suggests that people were bringing weapons into the venue. Whether this was for protection, intimidation, or something else, it shows that trouble was already close to Cafe Canasta. In 1955, the owner, Jerry Kowalski, was caught operating without the proper permits. This brought more attention to the venue at a time when the city was already watching nightlife establishments closely. Montreal was beginning to crack down on places it considered disreputable, especially businesses connected to alcohol, gambling, sex work, and disorder. Cafe Canasta started to fall into that category of venues the city had its eyes on. On April 13, 1957, Cafe Canasta experienced one of its first major documented conflicts that ended in death. A man named Assa Filiantro was involved in a fight inside the cafe. The exact reason for the fight is unclear, but he was brought to the hospital after suffering serious internal injuries. His condition worsened, and he later died from complications. In 1960, another conflict happened outside the venue involving employees and a group of men. The situation escalated into gunfire. Several arrests were made, and police closed off the area. Several minor injuries were reported. Again, not a huge documented event that would typically cause anything paranormal. But it was clear that undocumented altercations in relation to the building was happening during that time for unknown reasons. We are unsure what's been happening in the building behind closed doors. Around this period, court records also reference a protection-related case connected to Cafe Canasta. This suggests the venue may have been operating in a nightlife environment where pressure, intimidation, and organized crime influence were part of the background. In 1961, a fight broke out inside the cabaret involving a 17-year-old employee named Jean-Guy Mercier and 2 other individuals. Police discovered revolvers and other weapons, although none were used and no shots were fired during that incident. Everyone involved was brought before a judge and fined. The fact that a minor employee was connected to a situation involving weapons gives me the impression that the venue was dealing with more serious issues behind the scenes than what appeared in basic entertainment listings. That same year, in 1961, a man was found unconscious at the front doors of the venue at around 3:30 a.m. He was taken to the hospital, but police had trouble identifying him because he was carrying multiple pieces of identification. The details of that incident remain unclear, but by this point, Cafe Canasta had become a place repeatedly connected to fights, police intervention, and late-night trouble. In 1962, one of the most serious incidences connected to the building took place. A bomb exploded in the bathroom of Cafe Canasta, causing significant damage and seriously injuring a man named Werner Prowitz, a 32-year-old tourist from Flushing, New York. He had gone to the bathroom when the explosion happened. He managed to leave the venue and was met by police who had heard the blast nearby. He was taken to Hotel Dieu Hospital in serious but stable condition. Police believe the explosion was intentional and possibly connected to a grudge against the venue. Werner was not believed to be the intended target. Earlier that day, an anonymous call had warned the venue that a bomb had been placed inside. The warning was apparently not taken seriously because the venue had already received several threats before, most of which had led nowhere. The investigation was handled by the Montreal police, but as far as I could find, no one was formally identified as responsible. By 1963, the city of Montreal continued its cleanup of establishments it considered disreputable. Cafe Canasta's municipal permit was refused, with the city claiming the venue was connected to undesirable activities, including prostitution, soliciting, gambling, and drug use. The venue was forced to close for about a month, then remained open during ongoing legal proceedings that lasted for years. This is important because it shows how long the tension lasted between the city and the venue. Cafe Canasta was not just a place where isolated incidents happened. It had become a part of a wider conflict between nightlife businesses and city officials trying to control the red light district. A few years after the 1961 incident, Jean-Guy Mercier appeared in the records again. Now at around 19 years old, Jean-Guy was reportedly involved in a serious incident after a shift. It was connected to getting pushed out of a car and getting shot. He managed to get himself to a nearby home for help, but he asked the homeowners not to call the police. They did what any person would do and called the police. He was taken to a hospital, but when questioned, he refused to give information. Police suspect the attack may have been connected to an organized crime retaliation linked to an ongoing protection racket case that we mentioned before. This makes his earlier appearance in the Cafe Canasta records feel less like a random incident and more like part of a larger environment surrounding the venue at the time. By the late 1960s, Cafe Canasta starts to fade from the records. After years of permit issues, police attention, legal proceedings, and pressure from the city, the Canasta name slowly stopped showing up, the same way it once did. By 1971, Le Colibri appears at 1230 Saint-Laurent, while the older Canasta name was still showing up in some legal records. It is possible that different stories of the building were operating under different names, but that remains my assumption, based on the confusing overlap in records. By 1972, Le Gai Colibri was listed at the same address as a dining room, bar, and cabaret. The name suggests the building may have been moving toward a more openly queer or LGBTQ connected identity, beginning a chapter closer to the Café Cléopâtre we recognize today. The license holder listed around this period was Alfred E. Boivin, and in 1973, alcohol license records still connect the venue to dining room and bar operations. There were also articles of annual reports not being filed properly, suggesting that the building may have been messy behind the scenes. After that, I could not find much more about Le Colibri. But by the mid-1970s, the next identity was in place. The name Café Cléopâtre was incorporated in 1974. By 1975, an alcohol license was issued to Ilias Canavarous, and around this time period, Johnny Zumboulakis was hired. Johnny came to Montreal from Greece in the 1960s. His story became deeply connected to the building itself. He did not start as the owner. He worked his way through restaurants, kitchens, bars, and nightlife. He peeled potatoes, made pizzas, cooked, bartended, and eventually became part of Café Cléopâtre's daily life. By 1981, Café Cléopâtre was already described as legendary. In 1985, after working there for years, Johnny purchased the bar. Under Johnny's ownership, Café Cléopâtre became more than a strip club or cabaret. It became one of the last surviving pieces of the old red light district. The venue gave space to burlesque, drag, erotic performance, trans performers, queer nightlife, and outsider culture. It was not a clean or polished version of history. It was messy, loud, judged, and often misunderstood. But it was alive, and it gave people a stage. By the 1990s, the city was already trying to control how erotic businesses presented themselves. In 1991, bylaws began cracking down on erotic advertising and signage outside sex-related businesses. One rule prohibited exterior signs showing representations of the human body for businesses considered erotic. One quote from this fight stood out to me. "If shoe stores can promote shoes, why can't we promote our merchandise?" This was not just about a sign. It was about whether erotic businesses had the right to exist visibly, or whether the city wanted them hidden away. Throughout this period, Café Cléopâtre continued to grow as a space for expression, especially for the parts of the LGBTQ community. But that also made the venue vulnerable. In November 1995, an argument in the upstairs bar led to an assault involving a trans man who survived and recovered in hospital. In 1996, police raided the cafe and arrested a man, a woman, and a teenager on suspicion of drug trafficking. Police seized only a small amount of drugs at the time. So even after the Cafe Canasta years were over, the building was not free from conflict, police attention, or public judgment. By the 2000s, the old red light district was being rebranded into the Quartier de Spectacle. The city wanted culture, festivals, glass buildings, public squares, and a more polished version of nightlife. Café Cléopâtre did not fit neatly into that new vision. It was old school, rough around the edges, and tied to a part of Montreal people often romanticize, but do not always want to preserve in real life. The redevelopment project around Saint Laurent and St. Catherine was supposed to transform the block. Businesses disappeared, buildings were bought. Montreal pool room moved. The old red light district was being taken apart piece by piece. Johnny was offered money. He was offered relocation. At one point, the proposed solution was to move Café Cléopâtre into the old La Calèche du Sexe building for $1, transfer the permit, add compensation, and call it survival. Johnny refused. The space was too small. It was not fully available. And to him, Café Cléopâtre was not just a license that could be moved down the street. It was the building, the stairs, the sign, the performers, the regulars, and the history attached to that exact place. There was also an irony in the city's position. Johnny said that when he had tried to renovate the facade or change the windows, the city had told him he couldn't because they were historic. But now that same historic building was being treated like an obstacle. This fight was not just about property, it was about who gets to decide what kind of history is worth keeping. The city wanted to preserve the memory of the red light district, but not necessarily the living businesses still carrying part of that history. Artists, performers, heritage voices, and people connected to Montreal's counterculture pushed back. For many of them, Café Cléopâtre was not just a strip club. It was one of the last places on the Main where old cabaret, drag, burlesque, trans performance, nightlife, and outsider culture still overlapped. Johnny's own words captured the frustration of that moment. Since when do you have to kill the oldest so the youngest can grow? That isn't how you make history. By 2011, after years of pressure, legal fights, public debate, and redevelopment plans, The city finally backed away. Montreal abandoned the expropriation. The project would have to be redrawn around Café Cléopâtre. Johnny later said that he mostly felt relief. He had been told he had no chance. The city and the developer had more money, more lawyers, and more experts. By the time the new Carré Saint-Laurent project came back, Café Cléopâtre was no longer just an obstacle in the middle of a redevelopment plan, but an exception to the plan they had to respect. The new buildings would rise around it. The old red light district would become memory, archive, and heritage language. But Café Cléopâtre still remains, while the area surrounding it changes. After more than a century of changing names, changing owners, city pressure, police attention, organized crime rumors with not-so-documented traumas, redevelopment battles, and performances that gave people a place to exist, Café Cléopâtre is still standing. And with a building that has carried so much history, it is not surprising that some people believe it has carried something else too. This is where the alleged paranormal experiences come in. People claim that it holds a high energy feeling of pressure. As a personal experience, I went ahead and visited Cleopatra's second floor that was hosting a karaoke fundraiser in support of Forget the Box Media Inc., a federal not-for-profit organization that amplifies underground, marginalized, and hyper-local arts voices in Montreal. Of course, I brought an EMF reader, and our lovely Holly Rhiannon, who also came to support, had her spirit box on. During some whimsical moments, we asked the spirits to make some noise for the individuals on stage, which would make the EMF light up all the way, kind of like a screaming or an applause. To make things a little crazier, we asked some personal questions about body part preferences, since this is a strip club, and got some high readings when speaking of boobs and some other body parts. Today, Café Cléopâtre remains one of the last surviving pieces of Montreal's old red light district. It continues to operate as a venue connected to burlesque, erotic performances, drag local events, and underground culture. It is no longer just a place defined by scandal or police reports. It is a building shaped by survival, performance, resistance, and the communities that kept it alive. Café Cléopâtre belongs to a part of Montreal's history that the city has not always known how to talk about, but whether people wanted it preserved or not, the venue stayed. Thank you for listening. I'm Sarah Beaupre, and this has been another episode of Backstage After Dark. Thank you for coming.